Too small. Too wounded. Too young. The military tried to turn these men away, and in some cases nearly threw them out. Each would earn the Medal of Honor. No one asked what happens when the soldiers you try to discharge become the bravest on the battlefield. It starts with a Green Beret bleeding from 37 wounds who refused to stop fighting. On May 5, 1968, near Loc Ninh, Vietnam, Roy Benavidez's name was still on a medical discharge list. 3 years earlier, Army doctors had declared him permanently disabled after he stepped on a landmine. His right to serve hung by a thread. A retention waiver signed by the Surgeon General kept him in uniform when most would have been sent home. That same determination carried him into the heart of a firefight that would define his legacy. A Special Forces reconnaissance team was surrounded by North Vietnamese troops, their radio calls crackling with panic. Benavidez, already wounded and stationed at a nearby base, volunteered without hesitation. He jumped from a hovering helicopter into a landing zone swept by machine gun fire, sprinting 75 meters through bullets and shrapnel. In the chaos, he dragged the first wounded man to cover, treating injuries with torn strips of his own uniform. Every trip back exposed him to gunfire, but he returned again and again, 6, 7, 8 times, each time pulling another man from the killing zone. He fought for 6 hours. Grenade fragments tore into his back. A bullet shattered his jaw. A bayonet pierced his arm. He was beaten with a rifle butt and left for dead, but he kept moving, firing an M16 and a grenade launcher, directing airstrikes and rallying the survivors. By the end, Benavidez had sustained 37 wounds. He was so badly injured that medics zipped him into a body bag before they realized he was still alive. That day, Roy Benavidez saved at least 6 men who would have otherwise been lost. The Army had nearly discharged him as unfit for duty. Instead, a single waiver and a will forged in hardship put him at the center of one of Vietnam's most astonishing rescues. Audie Murphy's first encounter with military standards was a closed door. Too short, too slight, and barely 17, he was turned away by the Marines and the paratroopers. Even the Army nearly passed him over, noting his 110-pound frame and boyish face. Only a medical waiver, signed after a recruiter vouched for his determination, allowed Murphy to slip through the cracks and into uniform. That small administrative act placed him on a collision course with history. In January 1945, the fields near Holtzwihr, France, were frozen and scarred by months of fighting. Murphy's unit, Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, was ordered to hold a thin line against a German force that outnumbered them nearly 5-1. As tanks and infantry advanced, Murphy ordered his men to fall back to the woods, then turned to face the assault alone. A burning M10 tank destroyer, abandoned and leaking fuel, stood between him and the enemy. Murphy climbed onto the flaming wreck and seized the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on its turret. For nearly an hour, he fired into the advancing German ranks, his position exposed and the heat from the flames blistering his skin. Enemy bullets struck the metal around him, but Murphy held his ground, radioing artillery coordinates and refusing to leave until the enemy broke off their attack. Wounded in the leg, he continued to direct fire, buying precious time for his company to regroup and counterattack. When the smoke cleared, dozens of German soldiers lay dead or wounded. Murphy's stand had saved his company from destruction. The Army had almost denied him a chance to serve. In the end, it was the smallest man on the roster who blocked the path of a German counterattack and held a line that others would have abandoned. His Medal of Honor citation captured the moment. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. The waiver that let him serve had overlooked the one quality no regulation could measure: unyielding resolve under fire. Jack Lucas was just 17 when he landed on Iwo Jima, a Marine in name but still a boy by law. He had altered his birth certificate, added a year to his age, and slipped through the cracks of the enlistment process. The Marine Corps required recruits be 18 years old, but Lucas's forged paperwork and a height waiver, despite standing only 5'5", put him in the first wave on the black sands of Iwo Jima in February 1945. The chaos of the beachhead left no room for questions about age or paperwork. Lucas moved forward with his fire team, rifle in hand, nerves stretched tight by the thunder of artillery and the whine of bullets overhead. In a shallow trench, he and 3 fellow Marines took cover. Then, 2 Japanese grenades landed at their feet. Lucas did not hesitate. He shouted a warning, shoved one Marine aside, and dropped his body over both grenades, pressing them into the volcanic ash with his chest and arm. The blast lifted him off the ground, tearing through his uniform and flesh. He remained conscious long enough to see his friends scramble to safety before everything went dark. Medics found Lucas alive. Barely. Dozens of pieces of shrapnel had torn into his body, but he survived after more than 20 surgeries. His sacrifice saved 3 men and became legend in the Marine Corps. The official record shows that Jack Lucas was the youngest Marine to receive the Medal of Honor. He had lied to serve, broken regulations to reach the front, and in a single instant proved that the will to protect others can outweigh any rule or standard. Lucas's story stands as a stark reminder. Sometimes the greatest acts of courage come from those the system tried to keep out. Daniel Daly's reputation in the Marine Corps was forged in fire and friction. Born with a restless energy and a sharp tongue, he clashed with superiors from his earliest days in uniform. His file recorded reprimands for disobeying orders and for late reporting to drill. But these marks never slowed his rise through the ranks. Daly's aggression was impossible to suppress, and if anything, it thrived in chaos. He earned his first Medal of Honor in 1900 during the Boxer Rebellion, single-handedly defending the United States legation in Beijing against a wave of attackers. His second came in 1915 in Haiti, leading a handful of Marines over the walls of Fort Riviere under heavy fire. In both cases, he broke from the script, taking initiative where others hesitated and turning the tide with a mix of daring and defiance. But it was at Belle-Île Wood in 1918 that Daly's legend crystallized. As machine gun fire pinned his company, he rose from the trench and bellowed, "Come on, you sons of bitches, do you want to live forever?" The words cut through fear, rallying his men in a charge that helped break the German line. Daly's leadership was never neat or by the book. But on the battlefield, his stubborn independence became a force that saved lives and inspired generations. Twice decorated with the Medal of Honor, he remains a symbol of how the very traits that trouble the system can, in the crucible of war, become the spark of heroism. Sal Giunta's path to the Korengal Valley began with a medical waiver. A knee injury from high school nearly kept him out of the infantry, but a supplemental exam cleared the way. By October 2007, he was a team leader in Afghanistan's most dangerous terrain. On the night of October 25th, Giunta's squad moved along a narrow ridge, deep in the valley's shadowed canyons. Without warning, enemy fighters opened fire from multiple angles. Bullets tore through the darkness, striking soldiers on both flanks. Giunta was hit by shrapnel but pressed forward, sprinting across open ground to reach a wounded comrade. He dragged Corporal Kelly to cover, then spotted 2 insurgents hauling away another wounded American, Specialist Brennan. Giunta charged, firing his M4, forcing the enemy to drop Brennan and flee. He pulled Brennan back, applying a tourniquet under fire, and then returned to help stabilize the rest of the squad. The firefight lasted only minutes, but in that chaos, Giunta's decisions saved lives. His actions were recorded in radio logs and after-action reports, and within months, his chain of command nominated him for the Medal of Honor. In 2010, Giunta became the first living recipient of the award since Vietnam, a milestone amplified by news outlets and social media around the world. His story, forged in the trenches of Afghanistan, showed that the same pattern runs through every era. Sometimes the soldier who barely made it through the system becomes the one who brings his friends home. Across decades and battlefields, a pattern emerges that defies easy explanation. The men who once seemed to strain against the edges of military order, too small, too stubborn, too wounded, or simply too restless, are often the ones who seize the initiative when chaos erupts. Organizational behavior theory calls this behavioral slack, a small allowance for deviation that, instead of undermining discipline, can foster adaptability. In rigid systems, these outliers sometimes develop a sense of psychological ownership, a fierce commitment to their place in the ranks, hard-won and never guaranteed. The Rand Corporation found that roughly 12% of Medal of Honor recipients had at least one disciplinary mark before their defining act, a figure that stands out against the broader force. Over time, the process for awarding the medal has shifted. World War II's rapid citations gave way to Vietnam's bureaucratic delays, and now, digital media can propel a hero's story within days. Yet the core remains. When the moment comes, it is often the soldier who once stood on the margins who steps into the breach, acting with a freedom and urgency that rules alone cannot teach. The military standards are designed to protect the group, but history shows that unpredictable heroism sometimes grows in the spaces those standards leave behind. Today, the military still weighs rules against risk, and sometimes against raw potential. Heroes like Benavidez, Murphy, Lucas, Daly, and Giunta prove that valor defies prediction. In every generation, true courage rises from the least expected. The next legend may already wear the label unfit.